Fiancé ghosted me, married my dumb cousin, and my aunt rubbed it in my face. Now he's broke and jobless, she kicked him out, and I took all our savings. I, 29F, never thought I'd be writing this, but here we are. Buckle up, because this is a wild ride. 5 years ago, I was on top of the world. I had just gotten engaged to my boyfriend of 3 years, Jake, 31M. We had a great relationship, or so I thought. We rarely fought, had similar interests, and genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Jake was charming, ambitious, and seemed to have his life together. He had a good job in finance, and I was working my way up in marketing. We had started saving for our future together, dreaming of buying a house and starting a family. Everything changed when my cousin, Brittany, 26F, moved to our city. Brittany had always been the problem child of the family. She dropped out of college, couldn't hold down a job, and was always getting into some kind of trouble. My Aunt Karen, 50F, was always making excuses for her, blaming everyone else for Brittany's shortcomings. When Brittany arrived, I thought it would be nice to help her settle in. I introduced her to my friends, helped her find a job, which she promptly lost within a month, and even invited her to hang out with Jake and me. Looking back, I realized this was my first mistake. At first, everything seemed fine. Brittany was her usual self, loud, obnoxious, and always the center of attention. Jake seemed annoyed by her at first, which I found reassuring. But then, things started to change subtly. Jake began texting more, always with a smile on his face. He started going out more with work friends, coming home later and later. I tried to brush off my suspicions. Jake loved me, right? We were engaged, for crying out loud. But the nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. Then came the day that changed everything. I came home early from work, feeling under the weather. As I approached our apartment, I heard laughter, Brittany's unmistakable cackle, and a deeper voice that made my blood run cold. I opened the door to find Jake and Brittany on our couch, clothes disheveled, lips swollen from kissing. The world stopped. I felt like I was watching a movie of someone else's life. Jake jumped up, stammering excuses. Brittany just sat there with a smug smile on her face. I don't remember much of what happened next, just a lot of shouting and crying. I grabbed some clothes and left, staying with a friend for a few days. When I came back to talk things through, the apartment was empty. Jake was gone, along with most of his belongings. He wouldn't answer my calls or texts. His social media accounts were deleted. It was like he had vanished into thin air. I was devastated. How could he do this to me? How could Brittany betray me like this? I spiraled into depression, barely able to function. My friends and family, except for Aunt Karen and Brittany, of course, rallied around me, trying to help me pick up the pieces. Weeks turned into months. I threw myself into work, trying to forget. I started therapy, which helped me process my feelings and start to heal. I was slowly but surely rebuilding my life. Then came the news that shattered my world all over again. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon, about 6 months after Jake had disappeared. I was at a family barbecue, finally feeling like I could face everyone without breaking down. That's when Aunt Karen sauntered up to me, a glass of wine in one hand and her phone in the other. "Oh, sweetie," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "I thought you should know. Jake and Brittany just got married." She shoved her phone in my face, showing me a picture of Jake and Brittany standing on a beach, him in a white linen suit, her in a flowing white dress. They were smiling, looking disgustingly happy. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The world started spinning, and I thought I might throw up. My dad noticed something was wrong and came over, putting a protective arm around me. "Karen," he growled, "what the hell are you doing?" Aunt Karen just shrugged, taking another sip of her wine. I thought she should know. Better to rip the Band-Aid off quickly, right? I couldn't take it anymore. I ran to the bathroom and emptied the contents of my stomach. When I came out, my mom was waiting for me. She hugged me tightly as I broke down in tears. The next few weeks were a blur. I oscillated between crushing sadness and white-hot rage. How could they do this? How could they get married so quickly? And why did Aunt Karen have to be so cruel about it? I decided I needed answers. I reached out to Jake's parents, who had always liked me. They were shocked to hear from me and even more shocked when I told them what had happened. Apparently, Jake had told them we had broken up mutually and that he had met someone new. They had no idea about the cheating or that Brittany was my cousin. From them, I learned that Jake and Brittany had moved to Florida, where Jake had gotten a new job at a startup. They seemed happy, his parents said, but something felt off to them. They couldn't put their finger on it, but they had a feeling things weren't as perfect as Jake and Brittany were making them out to be. I thanked them for the information and decided to do some digging of my own. I created a fake social media account and started following Brittany. Her profile was public, and she loved to overshare. Through her posts, I pieced together their new life. They were living in a fancy apartment, always posting about expensive dinners and lavish vacations. Brittany wasn't working, of course. She referred to herself as a housewife and influencer, though she had barely any followers. Jake seemed to be doing well at his new job, always dressed in designer suits and talking about big deals. It hurt to see them living the life we had planned together, but I forced myself to keep watching. Something told me this fairy tale wouldn't last forever. And boy, was I right. For the next 2 years, I focused on myself. I threw myself into my work, got promoted twice, and started saving aggressively. I traveled, made new friends, and even started dating again, though nothing serious. I was healing, slowly but surely. All the while, I kept tabs on Jake and Brittany through my fake account. Their posts became more and more extravagant. Designer clothes, exotic vacations, fancy cars, they were living large. Brittany was constantly bragging about how amazing Jake was, how successful he was becoming, and how perfect their life was. But then, things started to change. The posts became less frequent. When they did post, the smiles seemed forced. Brittany started sharing cryptic quotes about challenges in relationships and staying strong through tough times. I had a feeling things were about to implode. My suspicions were confirmed when I got a call from Jake's mom. She was worried about him. He had stopped calling them as often, and when he did, he seemed stressed and distracted. She asked if I had heard anything. I told her what I had observed through social media, careful not to reveal how closely I had been watching. She thanked me and promised to keep me updated if she learned anything more. A few weeks later, the bomb dropped. Brittany posted a long, rambling status update that boiled down to this: Jake had lost his job. Apparently, the startup he was working for had been cooking the books, and when it all came crashing down, Jake was left holding the bag. He was under investigation for fraud. Brittany was furious. She ranted about how Jake had ruined their perfect life and how she deserved better than this. It was clear that their marriage was on the rocks. I'll admit, a part of me felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. Karma was finally catching up to them. But another part of me, the part that had loved Jake for years, felt a pang of sadness. He had thrown away our relationship, our future, for this? Things unraveled quickly after that. Brittany's posts became more and more unhinged. She complained about having to sell their designer clothes and cars. They had to move out of their fancy apartment into a much smaller place. Jake was struggling to find work, his reputation in tatters. Then came the post that changed everything once again. Brittany announced that she was divorcing Jake. She couldn't stand to be with a loser who had tricked her into thinking he was successful. She was moving back home to live with Aunt Karen. I sat back, stunned. It had all fallen apart so spectacularly. A small, petty part of me wanted to reach out to Brittany, to rub it in her face that she had gotten what she deserved. But I resisted the urge. I was better than that. Or so I thought, until I got an unexpected message that would turn everything on its head once again. It was a regular Tuesday evening. I had just gotten home from work and was settling in with a glass of wine and some Netflix when my phone buzzed. It was a message request on social media from a name I never thought I'd see again: Jake. My heart raced as I debated whether to open it. After a few deep breaths, I decided to see what he had to say. "Hey," the message read. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I really need to talk to you. Can we meet?" I stared at the message for what felt like hours. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to continue with the life I had built without him. But another part, the part that had never fully let go, was curious. What could he possibly have to say after all this time? Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at a neutral coffee shop the next day. When I arrived, I almost didn't recognize him. Gone was the confident, well-dressed man I had known. In his place was a shell of his former self, unshaven, hair unkempt, wearing clothes that had seen better days. When he saw me, his eyes lit up with a mix of hope and shame. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice hoarse. I don't even know where to start." I sat down across from him, my face neutral. "Why don't you start with why you're here, Jake?" He took a deep breath. I fucked up. I fucked up so bad, and I've lost everything. My job, my reputation, well, Brittany. But the worst thing I lost was you. And I know I have no right to say this, but I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I listened as he poured out his story. How he had been seduced by Brittany's carefree attitude, how he convinced himself that he needed some excitement in his life. How they had run off to Florida on a whim, getting married in a fever of infatuation. How he had gotten caught up in the lifestyle, taking risks at work to maintain their lavish way of living. And how it had all come crashing down. Brittany left me as soon as things got tough, he said, his voice bitter. She took what little money we had left and ran back to her mom. I'm broke, jobless, and I have nowhere to go. I sat there, processing everything he had said. A mix of emotions swirled inside me, anger, pity, a twisted sense of satisfaction, and something else I couldn't quite name. What do you want from me, Jake? I asked, my voice steady. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. I don't know. Forgiveness? A second chance? I know I don't deserve either. But I had to see you, to tell you how sorry I am. And I was hoping. Maybe. That's when it hit me. The thing I couldn't name before. It was power. For the first time since he had betrayed me, I held all the cards. And in that moment, I knew exactly what I had to do. Jake, I said, leaning forward. Do you remember the savings account we started together? The one for our future? He nodded, looking confused. Well, I continued, a small smile playing on my lips, after you left, I kept contributing to it. In fact, I doubled down on saving. And you know what? It grew. A lot. Jake's eyes widened as he began to understand where I was going with this. You see, Jake, I never took your name off that account. Legally, half of that money is yours. It's enough to get you back on your feet, to start over somewhere new. Hope bloomed on his face. Really? You do that for me? After everything? I held up a hand. I'm not finished. Yes, half of that money is legally yours. But I want you to think very carefully about your next move. Because if you try to claim that money, if you try to take even a penny of it, I will drag you through every court in this country. I will make sure everyone knows exactly what you did, to me, to your company, to everyone who trusted you. By the time I'm done, you'll wish you were still living in your car. The hope on his face crumbled, replaced by fear and shame. But, I continued, if you walk away right now, if you never contact me again, I'll let you go. No courts, no public shaming. You can start over with a clean slate. It's more than you deserve, but I'm offering it to you anyway. Jake stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Finally, he slumped in his chair, defeated. You're right, he said quietly. I don't deserve anything from you. I'll go. I'm sorry, truly. For everything. He stood up, looking older and more tired than his years. As he turned to leave, I called out to him one last time. Jake? He turned back, a question in his eyes. I forgive you, I said softly. Not for you, but for me. I'm letting go of the anger and the hurt. I hope you find peace. A single tear rolled down his cheek as he nodded, then walked out of the coffee shop and out of my life for good. As I sat there, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had faced my past, confronted my demons, and come out stronger. I had the power to crush Jake, to ruin him completely, but I chose mercy instead. And in doing so, I set myself free. I pulled out my phone and deleted the fake account I had used to follow Brittany. I didn't need it anymore. I was ready to move forward, truly and completely. As for the money in that savings account, I donated half of it to a charity that helps victims of financial fraud. The other half? Well, I treated myself to a well-deserved vacation. After all, I had earned it. And Aunt Karen and Brittany? Last I heard, they were fighting over who would pay the rent for their shared apartment. Some things never change. But me? I changed. I grew. And I realized that the best revenge isn't about hurting those who hurt you. It's about living your best life, on your own terms. And that's exactly what I intend to do.